Welcome everyone to our webinar on mastering application modernization, specifically focused on unveiling the power of automated business rules extraction. We are excited to have you here. My name is Alicia Marfatia, and I am a product strategist here with EvolveWare. We are lucky that we are able to co-present with one of our trusted partners over the last 5 years, Deloitte. Together, we have been able to help clients along their application modernization journeys. Just a quick introduction on who we are as a company. EvolveWare was founded in 2001 with a mission to automate IT processes using artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. All that work culminated in our core product today, which is the Intellisys platform. And that is a platform that helps to automate every stage of the application modernization process. Our customers to date have included government agencies, Fortune 2000 enterprises, and systems integrators such as Deloitte. We have also worked on projects worldwide, including in the US, UK, Europe, and Asia. Our speakers today include Keith Cox, who is the Managing Director of Application Modernization and Migration at Deloitte. Then you will hear from our Chief Technology Officer, Bruce Kirchner. Then you will hear from our CEO, Miten Marfatia, and I will be here in the background as the moderator. So just to set the stage a little bit, earlier this year, we at EvolveWare ran a survey around the priority and urgency of application modernization. And what we found were that 51% of organizations are either currently experiencing or anticipate experiencing critical issues that require modernization. On top of that, we found that those same respondents currently have or anticipate challenges hiring or retaining talent to support their legacy applications. So in our mind, the question of application modernization is not an if question, but really a when and a how. And to that effect, while there are many paths to modernizing legacy systems, today your speakers will focus on the business rules extraction path to modernizing these applications. So what will you get out of this webinar? What will you learn? Well, first we'll start by explaining what business rules extraction is and what the benefits are. Then we'll do a brief dive into the evolution of BRE and what the forecasted impact of Gen AI will be, in our opinion. Then you'll hear about some 4 paths to modernization that exist today using BRE, and that will be associated with some best practices as well as customer examples from our experience. And finally, you will get an overview of EvolveWare's Intellisys platform and what capabilities it has to support rules extraction efforts, including its Agile BRE solution. And with that, just a quick bit of housekeeping. You are welcome to submit your questions as they come up during the presentation through the chat pod. We will be hosting a specific session after the presentation for Q&A, where all the speakers will be available to answer your questions. And now, without further ado, I will hand it off to our partner, Keith Cox. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Alicia, and welcome everyone to our discussion on the power of automated business rule extraction. As with many of you, my experience in application modernization has been across many years of my career. However, my focus on business rules and their role in modernizing legacy applications began when we created Deloitte's application modernization practice back in 2017. I'm Keith Cox, and I'm Managing Director and a leader in Deloitte's application modernization and migration practice. We as a practice have grown, both organically and through acquisition, and of course, through the alignment with our incredible business partner network, including our longtime partnership with EvolveWare, where we have served clients together for over 5 years now. What are business rules? Business rules are literally the policies of companies or government agencies and institutions that are embedded in applications and systems. They're not just in the minds of the functional analysts, developers, leaders, or managers of a corporation. They're built into the application in the form of code. And of course, other tools that might contain logic that makes this application or system do what it does. Business rules in the form of code are the intellectual property or IP of the business. This IP or asset exists across multiple applications, systems, and ultimately the enterprise. From an intellectual property perspective, you can imagine how important these rules are to the business. Then what becomes more important as we look at legacy systems is extracting or exposing these rules to functional, technical, and business leaders to help them understand more about what a system does and create the foundation for migrating this functionality, whole or in part, to a modernized platform. You could say that these rules are actually the way business understands legacy application code. This is important because ultimately system knowledge and functionality are in fact locked in to legacy systems, and our ability to leverage this knowledge at times determines the success or failure of our modernization journey. Why extract business rules? Here's an example. A business or government has long-standing procedures or policies that have been in place for years. Every day, applications receive and process data supposedly in support of these policies. You could say that understanding these rules embedded in legacy code allows you to validate that the system is actually doing what you or the policy says it does. This alignment or misalignment to policy may not be immediately observable because some portions of applications run at different times, monthly, annually, and on demand. Your understanding of what legacy applications actually do would form the basis of this audit. Understanding legacy code or how this code is partitioned, dependencies on other code, both external and internal to the application, allows architects and developers flexibility in future designs. With these extracted rules, the future state design may be more effective when aligned with higher order system processes, such as, for example, a payroll calculation, or even at a low level, simply optimizing the future usage of data or data access, for example. How are business rules extracted? We've talked about the why of business rules and the importance of understanding legacy applications when choosing and executing on a modernization strategy. But how do we best extract these rules? Legacy code has to be decomposed into its constituent parts, and we obviously have tools for this. You may have calculations, procedure, or function calls internally or externally, and supporting logic that makes up an actual rule. I'll coin a phrase. I think rules are in the eyes of the beholder. Initially, at least, until we put proper context around them that aligns them with the overall business function. So a developer may see a rule as a specific set of calculations or data fields. No big surprise. They may document them as such. Putting context around this decomposed logic in the form of a group of rules or logic that actually make up a process is the next most logical step to forming the actual documentable rule. In other words, if you looked at this consolidated group of logic or this rule in the future, it would form a portion of the actual system documentation that would be aligned with the understanding, mostly, of a wider variety of audiences, both functional and technical. Let's take an example. We talked about business rules being in the eyes of the beholder. On the left, you see what is often the view of those closest to the code. You may see calculations, procedures, functions, and other logic that's relevant to a business process, but exists in raw form in the legacy technology platform. Now, this logic may span functions and programs, internal, external, and may be executed at different times on different platforms, if you get the picture. So therefore, the goal of business rule extraction and ultimately system documentation is to shape this raw functionality into an actual narrative or a smarter description of the process. So when I say smart, I'm referring to how we support this interpretation of code with metadata, documentation from subject matter experts, and maybe even leveraging technologies such as Gen AI, a very popular topic today, to do a lot of the groundwork around translating technical functions into human readable documentation. We can easily integrate other persons or subject matter experts into the organization then to validate our assumptions about the code. So let's talk about transformation. You might be surprised, but when I speak to CIOs or government officials or technology leaders, I frequently hear, hey, Keith, I have 40 million lines of code or some huge number of lines of legacy code, multiple languages, obscure platforms, and even in their most mission critical applications. They say, I just don't have any documentation. I don't know what the system does. And my most talented and experienced folks are either leaving or retiring. Maybe you know the story. It follows that they've articulated probably some of the most prominent issues related to legacy applications and identified key determinants of successful legacy system modernization that we need to align with, some of the biggest features and complications of this process that we see every day. We talked about validation earlier, about business policies matching what actually occurs in code. We have a phrase we like to use, and that is, there's truth in code. I'll repeat that. There's truth in code. In other words, tell me what the system is actually doing in the code. If it's correct, or if it's incorrect, we'll either update the documentation or create some where there is none. There's also risk, and this also leads into how we measure risk. You can define risk in many different ways. You can mitigate that risk at the application or overall at the systems level. But ideally, with this understanding, we're able to fundamentally determine the overall modernization strategy with current best practices and methodologies for reducing this risk. From rules can also come requirements. As technology has improved, it's not surprising that, for example, Gen AI could help us write user stories, functional and technical specifications, and code leveraging this set of extracted rules. Certainly, including the raw source code and other systems artifacts. If I were asked to provide a basic fundamental methodology or framework for supporting all that we've talked about today, I would suggest pursuing an understanding of systems from a top-down and bottom-up perspective. Now, this is not a new approach, but sometimes we can be overconfident about either direction of analysis. Our experience is that we need both, because before, during, and at the end of our exercise or project, we will have a wide variety of audiences and personas that benefit from this. Top-down leverages functional discovery of an application from a user's perspective. Long-term modernization or ongoing system modernizations need a forum to acquire the user's perspective. This may be outside of the technical aspects of the code, but also closely aligned with how a business needs applications and systems to perform in the future. Bottoms up, on the other hand, is how we leverage tools and automation to determine the structure and obvious intentions of a technology implementation. And this has been the topic mostly of our discussion so far. Having complete perspective and vision forms the foundation for moving technology modernization towards success. It's obvious that we've come a long way in automating scanning of code and decomposing applications and identifying business rules. And certainly we've identified the benefits of this automation in creating future state system implementations. We could say that what we've spoken about today is foundationally and essentially state of the art. What we're looking to and what you should look to are the current and future innovations that are happening that enhance dramatically what we're doing today. So today we're looking to leverage technologies such as Gen AI to automatically create a more natural language understanding of code, application flows, dependencies, and functionality that we can automatically align with the business. So in case you didn't know, today, a significant amount of technology that assists us in legacy documentation is actually supported by a number of subject matter experts. We call this supervised automation, and those subject matter experts are often referred to as miners. These subject matter experts are essential, for sure, and their efforts will be required in the future, but the overall understanding of code and systems are headed rapidly towards becoming a commodity exercise. In other words, in using Gen AI, we can essentially narrate a comprehensive system from raw code, the entire system design. While this may be missing some of the broader user functionality and implied capabilities that we would have gotten from, say, a top-down analysis immediately, this will decrease the application understanding time. And back to my C-level conversation example, that may change as well. And we can start discussing modernization sooner rather than later because we've harvested the base requirements in advance. And now I'll hand it over to Bruce Kirschner, CTO of EvolveWare.
Thank you, Keith. My name is Bruce Kirschner. I'm the CTO here at EvolveWare, and I'm responsible for the design and development of the Intellisys platform. The next topic that we're going to discuss today is the implementation of BRE in today's world. So BRE as a path to modernization, there are 4 different ways that we can use BRE today to reach our goals as far as a path to modernization of our applications. We're going to go over each of those paths in the following slides. However, before we start, I'd like to talk a little bit about rules extraction and what all it entails. As a first step to rules extraction, we need to define what is a business rule. So it's important for each organization to understand what their definition of a business rule is. The next step in the process is identifying those business rules, followed by classifying the business rules. And there are different strategies that we can use to identify and classify business rules. Some of those include domain-driven design approach or behavior-driven approach. These can be applied to the classifications of those business rules to help us reach our modernization goals. These rules can be applied based on context, and this context application is typically an iterative process. Architects can then use the context that have been defined and determine how best to implement the rules in a 2B system. The first approach to modernization is to a COTS product. In this particular approach, we extract and categorize rules. A business analyst or an architect compare those rules with existing COTS products and determine if those rules fit. Additionally, implementation may be required for the missing rules in this COTS product in order to satisfy the business need. An advantage to this particular process or modernization option is that there's little to no software development. So the burden of developing and maintaining software is on the third party that maintains the COTS product. This particular type of an implementation has been used by large state governments to move their rules from homegrown applications into off-the-shelf available products. The second option is to modernize to a rules engine. So again, in this particular scheme of modernization, we're going to extract and categorize rules. Typically, this is the first step for all of these modernization efforts. Business analysts and architects then organize the rules into rule sets. From there, the rules are deployed to a rules engine, and the business analysts, architects, and others write the workflow to execute those rules. The advantages of this approach are rules can be maintained by business users or developers. And typically the rules are written in a more English readable fashion. This particular implementation has been used extensively by insurance companies to implement validation rules for their particular applications. Modernization to microservices with code generation. Again, we're going to extract and categorize rules. Architects are going to determine those microservices categories. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of different strategies that can be used to help organize those rules for use in generating or writing microservices. The next step is to generate the actual microservices, and then to generate or write the remaining code to call those microservices. In this particular type of an architecture, low-code, no-code solutions can also be paired with the microservices strategy for a complete solution. The advantages of this particular type of modernization is that you're getting a modern, scalable architecture with many different deployment options. And as we're going to see on the next slide, there are a number of different avenues that you can take with a microservices transformation. State governments and insurance companies have both utilized this particular strategy for modernizing their applications. So this is the last modernization option that we're going to talk about today. We're talking about modernizing to a stream-based microservices architecture. This may not be what most developers and architects are looking at designing or developing, but there is definitely a use case for doing this. Again, the first step is extracting and categorizing our rules. The architect determines the microservices categories, and this is very similar to the process used in the previous slide in modernizing to microservices. The difference is in the deployment of those microservices. So we're going to deploy those microservices, and they're going to be consumers of information that is streamed to them. Microservices in this architecture can be configured to follow one another in accepting and consuming information for a final outcome. This is a very, very popular implementation that is gaining more traction with very complex large applications that have lots of rules that need to be executed in a sequence. The advantages of this particular architecture: it's modern, it's scalable, and it's an architecture that handles dependency very well. And when I mention dependency, I'm talking about dependency between different groups of rules or different groups of processes. This particular architecture has not been implemented by Intellisys at this point. We have not worked with customers, although the Intellisys product supports this type of a transformation architecture. And now I'm going to hand it over to Miten Marfatia, our CEO, and he's going to talk about Intellisys and its capabilities for modernization.
Thank you, Bruce. My name is Miten Marfatia, and I'm the CEO of EvolveWare. Keith began this webinar explaining the advantages of extracting rules as a path to modernization. Bruce described the options available to modernize the extracted rules into a modern application. I want to spend some time on the features and processes of extracting rules and modernizing them. It has been our experience that a phased approach with defined automation processes has a greater probability of success when embarking on application modernization projects. Let's take an application modernization project to extract and transform rules. Phase 1 will be extraction of rules, and phase 2 will be their transformation to modern platforms or code. We can phase the extraction of rules itself into multiple phases. Phase 1 would be the documentation of the logic of the existing application that is running in production today. This is critical because unless you know the current state of your application, you will not be able to identify the rules that are being executed in production today. Phase 2 would be assembling the rules from the documented logic using features and bookkeeping that will ensure that no rules get missed out. Once the rules are extracted, then will come the transformation of these rules to a modern application. Before I get into transformation, let me expand on how we addressed the rules extraction phases when we introduced our Intellisys platform in 2007. We spent almost 5 years developing an extraction technology that would extract every bit of information, including logic from the source code. Thereafter, over the last 15 years, we have added multiple features to consolidate the logic into rules, keeping track of all the activities being performed as part of the consolidation process. The process of business rules extraction, or BRE, as most people call it, is performed in Intellisys as follows. Intellisys is a web-based product that can be installed on premises or hosted on a private or a public cloud. The platform works on a knowledge base with supervised machine learning algorithms. The three components of Intellisys are an extraction engine, which is where our IP resides, a console, and a metadata transformer. Source code, as you can see on the slide, and this is the code of the application that you want to modernize, is processed through the extraction engine to extract every piece of available metadata that the code has. We have designed a process that makes this extraction fully automated by virtue of our machine learning algorithms. Users log into the console via a browser. There they are able to generate source documentation artifacts that are detailed top-down, from assessment reports to diagrams, and will include the display of logic in multiple formats. Thereafter, users have access to analysis and logic consolidation features that allow rules to be assembled from the extracted logic. As stated earlier, every activity is tracked and logged with detailed bookkeeping. Once the rules are extracted, we provide the transformation options like the ones Bruce described. The rules can be exported in multiple formats to serve as specifications to perform a rewrite of the application in the latest technologies, or they can be exported into a third-party product like a rules engine or a modern domain platform. Alternately, some rules can be converted to microservices using our transformer, with the remaining rules being transformed into modern code with frameworks like Spring. The transformation of code, either to microservices or to regular code, is 80 to 85% automated, with the remaining 15 to 20% requiring manual services. This slide is really similar to the previous slide, but it lists the level of support that Intellisys provides. We currently support source languages which are 20 plus in number. In other words, applications written in any of these languages can be processed through Intellisys and their rules extracted. From a transformation perspective, we currently transform code to C#.NET and Java with frameworks like Spring. The code transformation is 80 to 85% automated, and the remaining 15 to 20% has to be performed using manual services. Why use Intellisys? There are a number of products out there that perform processes related to application modernization. But we believe that Intellisys is probably one of the few or only product that automates every process end to end. And by automating every process, I mean from documentation to analysis to rules extraction, to code migration. When you think about the time and effort that Intellisys provides in savings with respect to the total effort of application modernization, Intellisys provides 95% or greater time savings when it comes to documenting the source code. When it comes to extraction of business rules, it provides savings of 60+%. So from that angle, Intellisys provides tremendous value to any application modernization project. Let's take a look at all of the features and the benefits that Intellisys provides. It's a web-based platform, which means it can be installed on premises or it can be hosted. This way, the client's security policies are preserved. Another advantage is it enables a phased approach and provides intermediate deliverables for each and every phase. This allows the client to monitor and assess the status of its modernization project. Advantage number 3. As I explained to you in the previous slide, we support the extraction of metadata and rules extraction from 20+ different languages. This allows you as the client to use a single product to modernize an entire application portfolio that may be written in multiple languages. Another advantage is the bookkeeping when it comes to extraction of business rules. This is very critical if you want to ensure the completeness of the extraction of rules and identification of every rule that exists in the embedded code. And thereby, the human errors that typically may take place if you're doing manual bookkeeping is avoided. One last piece that I want to mention, and it is very, very important, especially in very large modernization projects, is the ability of Intellisys to process code changes and updating the repository of documentation and rules. Let's think about this a little. You have code running in production, and you are embarking on a modernization project. Now, if the volume of code to be modernized is large, this may take some time. And during this time period, you are not able to freeze the application that is being modernized. In other words, you're going to make changes in order to satisfy business policies that are changing or to satisfy, legislative changes. In order for the rules to remain in sync with the rules being executed in production, these code changes need to be processed, and your rules extraction repository has to be updated. Intellisys provides that feature. And hence, when you end your project, you really have rules that are currently running in production. Before we show you a video on how BRE processes are implemented in Intellisys, I would like to share with you our track record when it comes to documentation and rules extraction. Intellisys has processed over 100 million lines of source code in the last 3 years for critical applications like Medicaid systems, integrated eligibility systems, and insurance claims. These have concluded successfully and are referenceable. We would love to discuss with you your application modernization initiatives and how Intellisys can add value to the same. With that, let us play the video.
Agile business rules extraction on the Intellisys platform enables your organization to modernize systems using intelligent technology and without needing to freeze code. Intellisys has automated the BRE process to where the time and effort to extract rules can be reduced by 60% or more. Every Agile BRE project performed with Intellisys begins with automated in-depth reverse engineering of the given application source code. This extraction of metadata is used to create various graphical and non-graphical artifacts that include a detailed assessment report, as well as a listing of the logic and their connectivity in multiple formats. The logic is represented in source language, in a neutral programming language or pseudocode, in a business analyst language, and as decision tables. These artifacts can continue to be updated as code changes are made to the current system during the modernization effort. Intellisys then provides the features to automate the consolidation and optimization of logic into business rules that are easily digestible by both technical and business analysts. These features include the ability to deactivate dead or unnecessary logic routines and statements, merge or split logic into rules, rename variables and constants to make the rules more understandable to different stakeholders, add program and statement level annotations to summarize rules at a business flow level, catalog and subcatalog rules by type and/or functionality to facilitate the organization and management of rules prior to export, transfer ongoing code updates into the rules repository, and generate reports highlighting the changes for impacted rules. And finally, export rules in multiple formats as well as to third-party COTS products and platforms. With Intellisys' Agile BRE solution, you have the automation needed to save time and costs and to mitigate the risk of losing sight of changes to your current system while modernizing. At the same time, you retain the freedom to organize and customize your rules as needed to achieve your transformation goals.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. We hope that you've enjoyed the presentation that you've just heard and have taken away some valuable insights from our speakers.